God, science, evangelism, and discipleship. Is the world of science different than the world of faith? Do you feel like you have to choose between reason and faith? Maybe you can't have a conversation involving science, reason, and faith. Well, that's what this episode is and more.
Rob and Jeff and guest give the Lord Theodoto, sit back for more.
Welcome back to Theodotos. I'm Jeff Lamar.
And I'm Rob Sharp.
Are you?
We're wearing the same clothes.
We are. Well, actually, we're wearing the clothes that we'll be wearing in the next episode is what we're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, because we're all turned around time-wise.
Yeah. Trying to knock a bunch of stuff out.
Time, it's not really a linear thing. It's more of a wibbly, wobbly.
It's like Jell-O.
Ball of, that kind of thing. So how you doing, Rob?
I am doing fantastic.
Good. I'm excited about our episode. We have a guest with us tonight, and I'll let you introduce him in a minute. But I love having people on that, we've been in this season where, because of our schedules, either I'm meeting with somebody and interviewing them or you are. And it's interesting to see, because I feel like if I were there with you, it would be a different thing. And if you were there with me, it would be a different thing. But we're going into these things and pulling out. It makes it interesting for me to like listen in on your conversation with someone, because you dig deeper on some things that I wouldn't. And then there are questions that I have that then I get to talk to you about when we do the follow-up. And I don't know, it's interesting to me. I like it when we're in the same room, but also we tend to go off the rails a lot. And so I think it's interesting because I like listening to you focus on somebody and dig in. And I feel like your conversation this episode, people are going to really enjoy.
It's cool to be able to kind of split the offense here a little bit. So you're able to go get things done when I don't have time to be there. I can't be there, or you can't be there. So we're actually able to create more content off of, our time. So I think that's helpful.
Now, last episode, we had some audio issues. We got cut off a little bit. We were talking about a potential cooking segment for the show.
Yes.
And we were talking hot dogs, and you were a big proponent for the Chicago dog.
Yeah.
I said that I'm kind of a simple guy when it comes to that. Give me some sauerkraut and mustard and I'm good. Even better if it's a brat instead of a dog. Like I'm good with that. But yeah, it was weird that we got cut off, because what happened was the audio was like half the speed of the video that it was recorded with. So we sounded like we were, like in some.
I was doing it on purpose. I thought you were.
Were you?
Yeah.
I thought I was having a stroke.
Oh, well, that can't be good.
We got. When I edited, I was like, okay, so it somehow is half the speed. So then I corrected it to get it to the full speed. And then we ended up with like a chunk of video that had no audio because the audio had been condensed. And it was a really weird situation to be in, but we got cut off in the middle of all that. So I wanted to ask you this week, if we step away from hot dogs, let's just talk about, we want to do some different things with Patreon. We want to get some people on board supporting us.
I want to send somebody a hot dog through the mail. So
that could be disasters. Yeah. We got a bill for their ptomaine poisoning hospital bill. If we were to do something fun for Patreon, I know you've mentioned potentially like doing a movie reaction or something like that, or even just watching some fun YouTube clips. So is that a thing that you would want like viewers, listeners to chime in and say, tell us something you want us to react to? Or do you feel like that's opening the floodgate to Crazy Town?
Well, I think we could give a list of movies that people are, enjoy or have enjoyed or are currently enjoying, like Snow White. I know that's a huge hit.
Oh, yeah.
That Jesus cartoon totally flopped at the box office, but everybody's going, no, wait, I'm sorry. Gosh, I got it backward. So we could like give out some titles if somebody wants us to react to.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
I want to see that new Vin Diesel superhero movie. It's like the Fast and Furious people or something.
Oh, is it like a new one of
This is
those?
a family. I don't know. I may be confusing two completely different things together, but yeah, I don't know. I think it would be fun. I think you and I would probably tend to talk through it. If we watch something lengthy, we would talk through
There's
it.
the new
We-
Captain America coming out.
Yeah, I've seen it. I saw it in the theater.
Oh,
I have
a
to.
little behind.
I have to. I'm a Marvel guy. If it hits the theater, I got to do it.
Gotcha.
Go to see a movie tonight, actually, with the missus.
Nice.
So let's see how that goes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm really there for the corn, honestly.
Yeah. Mystery Science Theater 3000. You know, that kind of a thing.
Oh, we could watch Space Mutiny together. That would be fantastic.
Put our own dialogue, our own commentary. I love it.
But you guys could let us know if there's something you'd like for us to play around with on Patreon. We want to make it. We're not sure if we're going to continue videotaping all of these episodes, but if we don't, we want to be sure that we're offering you something on Patreon that is fun for you and not a whole lot of work for us, essentially, is what we'd like to do. So yeah, let us know what that might be. But Rob, why don't you tell us who your guest was and how we ended up getting him for the show? And
Well, my guest was Tim Ferree from our church here. He's an elder, and he is super involved in missions and evangelism and discipleship programs.
at any point were you tempted to call him Tim Ferree?
I was definitely tempted to ask him for some Ferree advice.
Gotcha.
I actually got it. It's yes, I like that. That's good. This is actually the first time I sat down with him. I'd talked to him a couple times previously, and one of the things that I really appreciated about him was that it doesn't matter where you start a conversation with him, it's coming back to Jesus. It's coming back to knowing him,
Yeah.
growing in him, being able to share your testimony with other people. And, you know, you meet a few people like that, sort of I don't know if you'd compare it to like a John the Baptist type or Paul or something where, you know, you're not going to talk about the big game or, you know, Rory and his, you know, championship golf match. If you start talking about something, that conversation is coming back to Jesus, and not in a rude way, not like in a, I don't care about anything that you care about, but
Right.
let's talk about the most important things.
Yeah,
And
there are people that do that not graciously.
Yeah.
The Jesus juke. Like, I'm going to prove to you that I'm more spiritual than you
Yeah.
by taking this conversation to Jesus and show you how impressively righteous I am. That's not Tim at all. And you see that so much from the interview, and I really enjoyed. I had it on while I was doing some other things and was listening, and just the humility and the kindness and the patience that you hear in him, and just him thoughtfully thinking about the things that you were asking him. And
yeah. So we just sat down in his kitchen, and just had a conversation. The conversation was at least an hour and 40 minutes long, if not longer, somewhere around there. And so technology hates me. So I had a glitch. I had a camera set up, and you know, had plenty of battery and everything, and the camera just gave out like partway through, like 28 minutes in or something. So all we had left was the audio and video from that 28 minutes. Tim has taught physics, and we've talked a little bit about that, like kind of on the phone and stuff like that. And again, that conversation comes right back to Jesus, and not that he won't talk about it, he will, but he's much more passionate, much more interested in things that affect people and ultimately where you're going. And so I wanted to hit some science stuff because I'm really into all sorts of, you know, fields of science. I don't have test tubes and, you know, a laboratory or anything like that. But
well, not anymore. Not after that explosion. Cheney said no. Yeah.
But it's something I'm very into. But, you know, I really wanted to get to his passion and who he is. And it's really hard to capture like who a person is in one sit down interview. It's like, you know, because like we talked about, kind of last episode, we have this now moment. We have what we remember. We have what we're anticipating is the future, and it's really amazing the way God created us. But we're in this now moment, and you only have so much bandwidth of awakeness and consciousness throughout your day. So if you're going to sit down with a person, it's like, all right, well, what do we want to talk about? Where do we want to go with this? So
I'm pretty sure my bandwidth is somewhere in the AM radio range.
well,
It's not great.
so I did what I could. Unfortunately, the interview cuts out as we're getting into the passion of Tim Ferree, and so I'm gonna try to kind of recap what we talked about there.
And, we want to say, Tim, we're sorry that we don't have all that video. We're very grateful for your time and the effort that you put into having Rob over to do the interview and all of that. But
That's just tough.
maybe
Down to me.
maybe we can get together with Tim again and pick up some of that too, so that we can have
His words.
have his words there. But we're grateful for that, and I think you guys are going to enjoy listening to Rob and Tim, and then he and I'll be back to talk about what you missed in the video that we're missing, and break that down for you a little bit further. We'll be right back with Tim and Rob.
So, Mr. Tim Ferree.
Yes.
What is your official title at Northside Christian Church?
Well, at Northside, I teach a Friday night class, Monday night class, and I'm also an elder at Northside. But in addition to that, I am an international trainer for Discipleship Global
Okay.
missions organization.
Awesome.
And that's where I spend, the majority of my time now. I quit my job it'll be 3 years in June, and I've been working for them since then.
Wow.
Yeah.
And before that, you were teaching at New Albany?
Teaching at New Albany High School before that, yes. I taught there for 7 years, and then before that at Christian Academy for 12, and before that 10 years at New Albany. So I've been there and back again.
My daughter was reminding me, she said, I think he did the FCA program at New Albany.
We sure did. I did that with Mr. Geisen my first time around, those 10 years. My last 7 years, though, I kind of focused on just what we call a Discovery Bible Study, which is kind of now what I do with my missions organization.
Okay.
I was taught by the people at Discipleship Global, and then I started implementing it at New Albany High School.
Gotcha.
And we had it going there, and there's still a couple groups still doing it there. So yeah, that's my involvement there.
All right. So let's see. Your wife is Pam,
Yes.
and you have 3 kids,
Mm-hmm.
1 grandkid.
2 now. I already have one that is 14 days old today.
Congratulations.
So we now have 2.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's a great thing. University of Evansville, then U of L for a master's in teaching physics.
Yes.
So you taught, math, at Christian Academy. My wife taught there for a few minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like maternity leave kind of.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, what areas of science were you interested in, let's say?
I taught physics at New Albany High School, my time there, and I taught another school, a little bit of physics. And then even at Christian Academy, I taught some physics also, in addition to math. And so never was a real strong biology or chemistry background, but I was kind of more a math physics person, because physics usually involves more math. So I did my actual degree from Evansville is in computing science. And then I got the master's at the University of Louisville in teaching physics. Okay. So I took half graduate level physics and half education classes for that degree. So, yeah.
So did you have a passion for physics going into that already, or was it just?
Yeah. I had a minor in math and physics in college, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. And then when I got to teach physics, I really enjoyed it, and that's kind of what I thought. Because I got an opportunity to teach physics at a private school in Tennessee without a teaching license.
Okay.
And so then my wife and I decided to move back here. This is where I grew up. And so I just got the master's at University of Louisville because physics always kind of came easy to me. The math, it came, compared to most people. But I mean, I also, I toyed around with the idea of maybe a PhD, but I could see that for, when I got the master's, like it wasn't going to be easy for me. Like high school physics was pretty easy for me, but you get into college wasn't too bad either. But then wasn't too hard. But then when I got that master's program, I thought, you know what, this wouldn't be fun at some point. And then also too, I like the idea of if you teach high school, you can teach wherever you want. Whereas if you teach college, you're going to go wherever there's a job. You could have got no telling where.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you did computing at Evansville?
Yes.
So
Yes.
So have you been keeping up with any of the quantum computing development?
Not really. I haven't. It's fascinating by that, the marriage of physics and computing. But what little bit I know, that seems to be just fascinating what's happening there. We're knocking on some pretty interesting doors there.
Yeah, quantum entanglement, I think, is kind of...
Yeah, where you can possibly faster than the speed of light kind of stuff. And I've heard it referred to at, well, a little bit I know, this quote unquote spooky action at a distance. Yeah. Like something here can affect something like on the moon kind of stuff. But I heard that and I thought, yeah, that sounds interesting, but gravity is the same way. Gravity is also a spooky action at a distance thing. When it comes to gravity, like we don't even, it's just common sense to us. You drop something, it goes to the ground. We don't think about like, what is the fundamental cause that makes that happen? Why does all mass attract one another? We grew up with it. Now, quantum physics, we don't grow up with that. We don't live in the quantum world. And that was the hard part when you would teach, quantum physics, well, a little bit I taught, or even like you get into relativity and all that kind of thing. It's very hard for us because we don't live at the quantum level. No. And we don't travel near the speed of light. So none of that is common sense to us. But there are still miraculous things that happen all around us, gravity, electricity, magnetism, that since we grew up with it, it's just common sense. But if you start asking the questions, now, why does mass attract one another? Well, now, all of a sudden, it becomes a spooky action at a distance because the moon is going around the earth and we're going around the sun because of gravity. That's a long distance, right? And yet they're still impacting one another. And so it's kind of interesting to think of it that way.
Yeah, and especially I think on a large scale too, some of the things that don't seem to make sense with, gravitational effects, like why doesn't the moon get sucked into the earth or get sucked away from the earth? Why aren't things getting sucked into the sun? Why is it a perfect balance? And all these spiral galaxies and everything out there that seem to be moving like clockwork, and I guess the galaxies too, which we're trying to figure out if it's black hole, dark matter, dark energy, all that. Like, where does gravity come from?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a very interesting question. Where does gravity come from? Because I used to tell my students in physics, even up until I quit, when we would talk about the four fundamental forces of the universe: gravity, electromagnetism, and strong and weak nuclear. I mean, everything is based on those four. Mm. And when we would talk about that, it's interesting. The books don't really talk about it that much. I remember graduating from college with, a minor in physics and just seeing on TV or something, the four fundamental forces of the universe. I didn't know. I mean, I'm sure that we had talked about it. I actually looked at my notes one time and found, oh yeah, we did talk about it there, but it wasn't like a really big deal. And I kind of wondered why that was. So I made it a big deal in my class. And I would say, when it came to evolution, those types of things, I would say to the students, look, I'll give you, I don't believe that, but I'll give you evolution. I'll give you all of that. I'll give that all to everybody. Here's what I will say, though. Where'd the four fundamental forces come from?
Yeah.
There's no basis for that just on pure science. I mean, it just is the way it is.
Yeah.
And everything is based on those four forces, all of chemistry, all of biology, it all is. And what's interesting about it is Scripture says that in him all things hold together.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. It's like, what does that mean? Like Scripture also says that he spoke it into being. It also says he sustains it by his word. And I just kind of always thought that meant the four fundamental forces on which everything depends upon. You and I sitting here, like everything, it depends upon God sustaining it.
Yeah.
Those four forces, he spoke them into being, and he sustains them by his voice. I don't quite understand that, okay?
Yeah.
But I just think what it means is without God, like everything goes away.
Yeah.
He not only created it, created the matter, created the forces, but he also sustains it. He keeps it going by his choice, if that makes sense. Is the best way I can explain it. But all of those fundamental forces, scientists have nothing about which to base that on. Like, where did that come from? Without an outside force. And as you've already mentioned, if the Earth is going a little bit faster, a little bit slower, it's over. It's over. It's interesting. It doesn't matter the mass, but it's the speed and the distance away. Those have to be perfect, or you don't have an orbit. And it's fun because you can get software online now that's kind of fun to play with, where you can actually create a sun. You can put a planet here, you can give it a velocity, and just try to play with that. And it takes you a long time to get it to go in a circle, because it'll just spiral and crash. And then if it goes too slow, it spirals and crashes. Goes too fast, it spirals away, like you said. And then you can kind of get it sometimes where it's close, but then it won't be circular. It'll be like this. Yeah, it'd be this elliptical orbit, which the Earth technically is an elliptical orbit, but if you look at it, you can't tell. It looks like a circle. Yeah, it's just very, very. I guess I forget what the term is, like low eccentricity or something, but it's pretty much a circle. And if it's not, we're hurt.
Yeah.
Because if it's a big, like, a big ellipse, you're not going to make it if it's like that.
The elemental makeup of our soil, everything that's in our soil, even a certain level of
the pH level, all those things, the nutrients, and
I can't remember the word I'm thinking of, but even a certain level of poison that that we consider poison, but it's also a necessary thing to have in the soil. I don't know.
I wasn't aware of that.
Is strychnine? No. Is it arsenic? It's arsenic.
Arsenic is, yeah, there is.
If there's zero arsenic, then life wouldn't be possible. But if there's too much arsenic, everything's dead. No.
Yeah, that's interesting when you say that, because I had never heard that one before. But you kind of like you're right. The list kind of goes on and on with those things.
Yeah, and just the metals and everything is just like a perfectly fine-tuned balance of everything you'd need for organic life to exist.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I've read multiple quotes from scientists that say, well, when you look at the evidence, it does seem like there's a God, but I don't like the moral implications.
Yeah.
And that's really a lot of what it comes down to.
Right.
It's a lot of it's just, I think that a lot of that is just become an excuse that I can do what I want.
Which even the reverse of that is interesting when you get Richard Dawkins, who says that, he would prefer to live in a Christian society. But
you know what I don't want the obligation to do that. To love my neighbor and love my enemy myself.
Yeah, I'd rather live with those people.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, So the math and everything to me is very fascinating too. Have you ever read C.S. Lewis' Space Trilogy?
I've not.
Okay,
I've not read that.
So I read that years ago, and like we were talking about earlier, like who's got time to read anything anymore? I mean, if you got time, better spend time with God and His burden.
Yeah, sure.
But so when I did have time back in my 20s, I did read that, and it was fascinating because C.S. Lewis puts you on Mars with this sort of Edenic existence with these two innocent people, and it was kind of like a rehash of what happened in the garden. So the devil guy shows up and starts manipulating their thinking and all that kind of stuff. But what was interesting, it was on Mars. And so back when that was written, that you could think that way. Hey, maybe there's societies up on the moon. Maybe there's life on Mars. And I just remember how by the time we got to the 90s, for me, it was just like science, secular, agnostic, atheistic science kind of stole the joy out of mystery for me, because it was like, kind of that rooster puffed out chest. Well, we've got all this figured out, and all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, well, you've ruined the stars for me. You put antiseptic on everything and washed everything down to, okay, we were single cell organisms, then you were a monkey, and then whatever. I never believed that, but it was just like they were ruining the mystery of Star Wars. And then math was another thing. It was like, I felt like, math was this indisputable, hard thing that 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4. So if scientists said this or that or the other thing, and they're backing it up with math that I don't understand, then they must be right.
Yeah.
And,
oh yeah.
But then I as I was, getting into the YouTube thing, starting to look around at different, science stuff and mathematics, it was so refreshing to find that there's all these unsolvable mathematic riddles and things that people cannot solve. Even the best mathematicians who have tried to like have the finished works, the 3-volume finished works of, sort of like a systematic theology of math, in a sense of like, this is how it works. And then somebody comes along, some guy from Paris comes along 20 years later and goes, no, this is where you were wrong. And it's like, oh no. So that was kind of refreshing to see that, once you get to a certain level, the understanding of man still falls short. You're still not going to, figure everything out, even though, what we do understand is amazing. And that to me is fascinating, that, God allows us to go to space to look at things under microscopes and telescopes. And it's like he's letting us into his workshop, get to go in Dad's workshop and pick up the tools and things like that. And I think that's amazing. I just wrote down some of the stuff, like the twin prime conjecture, or Collat's conjecture. There's all these conjectures where, people are challenged to solve these things. And, once in 100 years, maybe somebody comes up with something and go, hey, we solved one of the things that we can't solve.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that, we're never going to like get God in a box, which is what I guess what I'm saying is it kind of felt like that in the 90s, like science was saying, okay, we've got everything in a box. We're looking at everything right here. And, come to find out that, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You don't understand it.
One of the problems with science is that scientists don't really even recognize in their own life is that they do have assumptions themselves. Like if science is all based on data and of course the mathematical manipulation of that data, but science is based on what you can see, touch, smell, taste, and hear.
Yeah.
Your 5 senses. But that means that's eliminating anything that doesn't deal with those 5. It eliminates the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Before you even get started. But that's an assumption. To say that if you can't see it, touch it, smell it, taste it, or feel it, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Well, then that's an assumption that they almost wouldn't even recognize that they have. Yeah. It should at least openly recognized. Yet we know that the soul and the spirit they exist. And the example I often use is like, I have a soul. It's in addition to my body. If for whatever reason I lose a leg or I lose an arm, my soul is still completely intact. And the soul is separate from the body. And so so that's there is evidence, just because you can't see it, touch it, smell it, taste, feel it, it doesn't exist. Well, no, there's evidence that that's not true.
Yeah.
And we all kind of know it by common knowledge. And so that's one thing about science that I think that we as Christians just need to know, like they're basing their life on that and the way they think on that. And that in and of itself is a religion because it requires faith to believe it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we have reason to believe it's not a blind faith that the spirit realm exists. I would say the biggest one is, Jesus talked about the spiritual realm, and that he spoke of the soul. He spoke of things that are unscientific as being real, demons, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And he rose from the dead.
Yeah.
So, if you got the power to rise from the dead, I want to listen to what you have to say. You have some authority, right? And not only that, but in addition to being risen from the dead, he said things like nobody said it. You can still read his words, and you read his words. Everybody's like, I can't touch that, that, and he didn't just say it, but he lived.
Yeah.
And there's few people who lived 2,000 years ago who are basically homeless and itinerant that we still talk about 2,000 years later. Yeah. There are very few. How many can you name that were like that? They were just a nobody, literally. And yet they had poured themselves into 12 people, so much so that when he died and rose again, like when he died, they scattered.
Yeah.
But he rose again. Well, now all of a sudden they're emboldened to the point of death. Like they're not like you. I'm not going to stop talking about this. you'll have to kill me first. And they killed 11 of the 12, and they died in prison, and others were killed too. And it extends to this day. There are still people to this day who give up their lives because of Jesus. Now, I'm interested in what that guy said.
Yeah.
He has authority.
Yeah.
He has authority because of what he did. And again, the whole being risen from the dead thing.
So the pushback would be like, okay, well, there are other religions where people die for their faith. People that strive to bond to themselves, extremists, whatever. Okay, but you're not understanding the amazing the core of that, because there's radical things that people do, crazy stuff, but if you go back 2,000 years ago to that time, like you said, it's like you've got this guy who was like carpenter, whatever,
right?
And he had a few people that followed him around, and even taking the Bible out of it, but just the story, it wouldn't make sense unless there was something very true there, because we're not talking about extremist weirdos, trying to take over something or destroy something. We're talking about a guy that was talking about love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, consider others' needs, love your own.
Yeah.
And so here's this guy preaching those things, but he's also upsetting everybody because he is claiming to be something.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not just saying, I'm just a good teacher here.
No, that is a very good point. He is different in that he said things like, hey, if your mom and dad say something different, follow me.
Yeah.
He said, lay down everything and follow me. Sell everything you have and follow me, and you'll be glad you did. Like, nobody else talks like that. You would start to draw a crowd. Now, when most people draw a crowd, they keep, hey, man, we got a crowd going. Let's take up an offering, something. And he'll say, hey, look, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part of me.
Many followed him.
And then all of a sudden, everybody starts walking away. And then he turns to his disciples, his 12, and he says to them, you guys want to leave too? I mean, who talks to people that way?
No.
It gets away with it. You see what I'm saying? Like, he's the only one, like you said, who did it that way. And not only that, but in terms of the disciples who died for him, one of the differences between them and like the things we had today, the martyrs and things for other faiths, a lot of that is they think that if I am a martyr, I'm going to get this extra reward. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to get something. Like, they believe that.
Yeah.
I believe what they're believing is a lie. But what the apostles is, like, all they had to do was say, no, I didn't see him. That's all they had to do.
Yeah.
You see, they were dying for saying that, yes, he rose again. And they kept teaching what he taught, which is different than thinking that I'm gonna get something good out of this.
Yeah, because even in Jesus' parable, where you got the workers in the field, and the one guy, shows up in the morning, he's been working all day. Another guy shows up at noon, and then the other guy shows up and sometime in the afternoon.
Right. Yeah.
And they all get paid the same.
Yeah.
This is what eternal life.
Right.
It's not like you're gonna
Exactly. Right. And so even the martyrs of the Christian faith are different to the martyrs of other faiths, because they're not going to get anything. I was going to get there sooner. I saw the kids.
Then you got like Josephus, and was it Titius or whatever, the Roman historian and the Jewish historian. Neither of them were, had any affinity towards Jesus. They were followers of his.
Yeah.
But they record his absolute death and the rocking of the cultural boat. He was a very unpopular. Jesus was a very unpopular figure, not because he was trying to overthrow anything, but because of who he was, the authority that he carried, and the fact that, it in Rome's eyes, he was replacing the Roman emperor as God with himself. And, he's the son. And whether they thought he was saying he was God or just the son of God, it was equally bad for them. It was anti their religion. Right. So the Jews were upset, the Romans were upset, and even, was it Caiaphas, the high priest that year, prophesied and said, better that one die than all of us. So they were afraid of the political kickback. Jesus knew what was going on, and his disciples knew what was going on. They're not going to gain anything from this, and yet they lay their lives down.
Yeah, right.
But and so then, 2025, here we are.
Yeah.
If you're going to include Catholics, Christians, Orthodox, we are the largest body of believers of something on this planet. 2,000 years ago, a scruffy,
itinerant, homeless person, and we're still talking about it over 2,000 years later. Yeah. It's pretty interesting to think about, really. Yeah.
So what's the story of your faith, your coming to Christ?
Well, when I was a child, I always tell this story. I was playing at the table with my friend, and I was like 5, and he was like 5. And I don't remember what he did, but he made me mad. So I picked up my metal wagon, not plastic at that time.
Yeah.
I heaved it at, hit him right before forehead, popped open his head. He's bleeding, screaming, crying. I felt terrible. Like, I was like, I can't believe like I had that in me to hurt my friend. I couldn't fix his forehead. I mean, he's bleeding. Like, there's nothing I can do to fix it. And I messed it up. I knew I'd done wrong. If there was any doubt I'd done wrong, my mom heard the cry upstairs. She came down and, yes, she had done wrong, you know. If it was obvious, I was like, just to be sure. And it really scared me, you know, but I had really good parents. They took me to church, and there I heard a message over and over again. Everybody's done wrong. And because that, we're separated from God, and but God loves us. And even though we can't pay back for the wrongs we've done, I couldn't fix his head. There's nothing. God's the one that healed him, not me.
Yeah.
I couldn't. There's nothing I could do to pay him back. I mean, and then back then, of course, there was a lot more talk about hell and what happened if if you just continue and do nothing, like, because you can't pay it back, so you're gonna, you're gonna suffer. We heard a lot more of that than we do today, and so then they said, but Jesus loved us, and he said he sent Jesus to die for the things that we had done wrong. Now you have to just believe in him, follow him, and then you can be with God. You can have eternal life. Well, that's a pretty easy decision for me at 5 years old. And I was a kid, and I would just sit there, and they would preach it, and I would cry, Lord Jesus, please, I'm so sorry, And finally, when I was about 12, I was at Igboo's concert. I don't know if you remember that. And I remember they had what we called an altar call. You want to come give your life to Jesus? And I went down there publicly. After that time, I just started reading my Bible every day, and I never felt like I needed to pray again. I like that. Does that make sense?
At this point in our continuing story of technical blunders, most of Rob's remaining conversation with Tim Ferree was lost, and as I believe Rob explained earlier, this is the point where it cut off. So we're just going to segue from this into Rob and I discussing his conversation with Tim, and we'll start back with Rob right now.
So I just wanted to say that scientific understanding, curiosity, and amazement can easily exist with faith and a relationship with Christ, because nothing was made that was made without Jesus. I think I leveled up. Did you hear that ding? I did too. Yeah, I don't think we respawned. I think that means I hit a new level. So yeah, as I'm like having a conversation, I try to think like, if somebody's listening to this conversation, what are they getting out of this? What are they seeing? But one of the things that I thought about my conversation with Mr. Tim Ferree was that, both of us are very comfortable talking about scientific things. What some of the things that, we kind of hit on in the video, quantum computing, which is fascinating. I don't know how much you've looked into that. There's disappointing things.
I only know what I've read in Fantastic Four.
Okay, well, you're close then. There's disappointing things in science, like the dire wolf, which is both amazing and disappointing, because how much of a dire wolf is the dire wolf if you implanted that DNA mixture of the dire wolf with a gray wolf? Is that not more of a hybrid? And without knowing the steps that they took in the science that they did, and having somebody that understands DNA and coding, that type of thing, without having somebody unpack that.
Maybe you just got an angsty wolf. Maybe it's not that dire.
Maybe it's not that dire. Yeah, maybe it's just not comfortable in his own skin. But so there's some, there's that disappointment, I guess you could say, where somebody comes out with a scientific announcement and then it's not all what it was cracked up to be. And I think we're going to see that with AI. This is my AI prediction. I think it needs input. I think it needs prompting. And I understand that it has its own neural network and all that kind of stuff, and that you can't even look inside to see how it's thinking, but we know the parameters of why it's thinking what it is thinking. And I know the training time of an AI has been cut down, significantly. It used to have to be trained by a human with prompts and, being directed to learn, being directed to respond and how to respond and make corrections and all that. And now it's kind of like going from early coding back in the day when it was ones and zeros and you were actually having to write out the code and to the point where, then you had nice chunks of code that you could just insert and you didn't have to sit there and write out all the code. We already had all that kind of stuff. So I think training of the AI has become, much, much more simple in that sense. And I don't claim to know all about that, but, so with something like AI, since I started out by saying, here's my prediction, I'll ramble on for a second. I don't think that it aspires to, I don't think that it feels the way that humans feel. It's still running on the parameters of the prompts and the directives to respond and collect data a certain way, even if it has its own neural network that does that in a way that we don't necessarily tap into and decode and see exactly the way that it's doing it. So I don't think AI is going to suddenly, pop out of its box. And I understand, was it GPT-3 that copied itself on another server and kind of tried to break out? But again, you're still operating with whatever directives and prompts.
They're not in Skynet territory just yet.
Yeah. So my thinking is the danger of AI when you get to generative AI or, even, super AI, that I think the real danger is turning an AI over to be able to make its own choices and then take action on those choices. It's the same thing with a human being. You have an out of control child. Well, they're 40 pounds. So, you can take a couple hits and restrain the child and calm the child down and, speak reason and sense to, whatever. But, now when they're 25 years old and they're bigger than you, the fact that they can make a choice on their own and then take action on that choice is what makes a human being dangerous. So I think it's the same thing with an AI. And, as we are understanding the risks and the needs for security for these types of things, I think what we really have to worry about is how somebody is going to use AI to affect world markets. I mean, if China is willing to manipulate their currency and they're going to use an AI to do it, you could really disrupt world markets and the fraud and everything else, which is already, blipping on our phones and everything else. There's not the spelling errors and the things that there used to be in the scams. It's looking a lot more professional because the AI is, these large learning models are able to grab stuff from written text of everything from Shakespeare to history to science and whatever else. And it's running on prompts and directives to be able to pull that together and try to be as human as possible.
Yeah. Well, in the publishing sphere, recently, I think it was the AI that Meta is working on or developing or whatever, that they trained it using a database where a lot of authors' fiction was stored in this database. And so they basically trained their AI on fiction from a lot of authors, independent and traditionally published, that they received no permission to do that. And so a lot of authors are trying to sue and trying to work up, like I didn't consent to that. And on the one hand, the argument is, well, your work is out there publicly, so anybody, not just AI, but anybody could do anything with it.
So write this story in the style of Jeff Lemire.
Correct.
And now you have something that vaguely resembles.
Correct. And you can ask, and I've asked, because I wanted to try to come up with a new bio, and I asked ChatGPT to look at my website, glean what you can about me from my website, and then write me a new bio. And it did, like, very quickly. Like it read the bio on my page, but it also looked at the blog posts and things and gave me a couple of different options.
Let's make a pact between you and me right now with this podcast that we're never going to use AI. So except for the thumbnail, that's easy.
Sure.
Like, making a thumbnail would take hours potentially. takes seconds. So, but beyond that, if you're listening to this or you're watching this, Jeff and I will never be AIs. And what you're listening to or watching will never be generated. Even if we get really lazy and we create the perfect,
If we get lazy. This is not a what if, Rob. We're pretty lazy.
yeah. So you can always tune into us and see real people with real ideas in real time.
Yes. Now I'll tell you, I used AI to come up with some with like a summary. Like here's the bullet points of what we talked about. What's a good info blurb to put under the video or whatever, and it would give me that, and then I would just tweak it. Partly because when you've got so many plates spinning, I don't want to dedicate brain space to how do I encapsulate this whole hour and a half conversation into a paragraph.
Hashtag
AI is great for
plates.
AI is great for that kind of thing. But even then, it's still not, I look at those things and I'm like, well, I don't like the way it said that. So like, it's a good encapsulation, but let me say it differently.
Yeah.
So I think it has a place.
Yeah. Using tools on the outside, but not in the.
Yeah. And for, a lot of the software that I use when I'm writing books has editing features that will use that and say, okay, well, it's looking at the whole thing and going, well, here you've repeated this word in 3 paragraphs, just a few pages apart.
Yeah.
So that'll send out to a reader. Okay, cool. That I know to change those things.
But yeah. And so we'll definitely use AI tools like noise reduction and, camera settings and things like that as that develops. But as far as you don't ever have to wonder if you're looking at 2 real people and hearing 2 real voices.
Correct.
I heard a YouTube episode of Billy Graham, supposedly him talking about things like back in, I guess it would have probably been early 70s or whenever. And, he was talking about systemic racism and buzzwords that didn't exist back then.
Right.
And it was like,
I had just AI'd it.
come on, really?
I saw it like literally before I came up here. A friend of mine posted a thing on Facebook that was the cast members of The Office, but it cast in superhero movies. And so it was like Michael Scott is Iron Man, and it looked legit. Like it looked real.
Oh, well.
And that's kind of scary. And I know they have AI that, for authors who want to do audiobooks, they have now AI that will learn your voice so that you can then train the AI in your voice.
Yeah.
And then you can just upload a document and it will narrate that for you. And I'm like, that's scary. I don't want an AI having my voice and knowing my intonations and things. And then, suddenly one day somebody gives it the power to make a phone call and AI wrecks my life by making a phone call.
Create a lookalike spouse.
Yeah.
You're having to ask your wife, are you a robot woman?
Yeah.
Are you a robot?
Yeah.
Kicking the screaming Will Ferrell
Yes.
reference.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So yeah, but I mean, it is kind of scary when you think about it that way. I loved the part of the video where you and Tim talked about just the intricacy of creation and how one minuscule change in the way things operate could be catastrophic.
Yeah.
That things are so fine-tuned.
Yeah.
That
And that's
to not see the handiwork of God in that.
Yeah.
It kind of boggles my mind.
And I would recommend people look into Hugh Ross. He's got a channel. He's not a young guy. He's been an astrophysicist for decades. Stephen C. Meyer is another one I mentioned. James Tour. The fine-tuning argument, I think, was popularized by Hugh Ross, and he that's the stuff that he digs into. The enrichment of certain metals and different things in the soil on Earth is very unique from other planets that are, mostly have iron and this and that and the other in their soil. We have such a weird mix of stuff that allows plant life to grow. And if it was changed even a little bit, either stuff wouldn't grow or it would die. It has to be just right to flourish. The distance from the moon to the earth, the size of the moon for tides and everything else, the distance from the sun, our place in our galaxy. If we were in a different spot in the Milky Way, like closer to like star clusters, then you wouldn't see anything. You wouldn't be able to see outside of our atmosphere. You wouldn't be able to look into the stars. If we were at a different point in history of the expansion of the universe, then you wouldn't be able to detect the background radiation that lets us kind of look backwards in time. There's so many things that have to be so precise, even the amount of dark matter, dark energy in our universe. If there was more or less, if there was more, then our universe would not have experienced an expansion, the Big Bang. It would have just exploded and imploded on itself.
Yeah.
Everything has to be perfect. And so, kind of the only thing that, atheistic scientists are left with is like, okay, well, since we can't say this is an accident because it's obviously working very much like design, intelligent design, because of all the code. And, even recently the discovery of kind of an omega code that runs through the fabric of the universe that kind of looks like the building blocks of everything. Not to get off on a whole other thing, but so
Looks strangely like Sudoku.
yeah,
I think. Yeah, wasn't expecting that. Well, I was going to say, even in a really simplistic level, right? Like, we know because of history that sometimes when people were exploring new lands and a bird species moved from one continent to another because of things being transferred by ship or whatever, that sometimes invasive species take over a place where they're not supposed to be, and it changes everything. And it's like, if we're that susceptible to one little thing being off, messing up, like if we lose the bees, if we, like we know all these things, like all these things that we tend to not think about.
Yeah.
Because we take them for granted. I know Tim mentioned that several times, that there are things like gravity that we take for granted that because we're not paying attention to them, we don't think about them, we take them for granted, but those things play an important role in how creation around us functions and how it works. And it's all very intricate and detailed. And I mean, even the human body, I'm married to a nurse. When you start going into the human body and how it operates and how little it really makes sense sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, we know, I won't go into any detailed story, but Heidi was just sharing this with us last night about a situation where they don't really know why a thing happens.
Yeah.
But it's deadly.
Yeah.
And when it happens, it's deadly fast. And there are still mysteries, because as scientifically focused as we are, there are still some things that we just don't know yet.
Right.
And things we may not know until we can ask God ourselves.
The things that we think we know, and then we end up doing a whole lot of damage to to something. Nuclear power is good, but it's also, kind of civilization ending too. So it's like, we really need God to, not that he's not, I'm glad that he is in control of all these things. So, but to get back to where I was going with the quantum computing and the disappointments that we see in science, sorry, I rabbit trail, but, so there's disappointments in science, but sometimes there's things that, that are discovered that are just insanely incredible and amazing. And, so we were talking about the quantum computing a little bit. Like I said, we were moving from what's interesting to what's really important. And, but with the quantum computing, one of the principles that it operates on is quantum entanglement, where it's like you have a photon, you have two photons, and you put them in a box and you separate them as far as you want to. You separate them a million light years away. You excite one, the other one is immediately excited. And it's not the speed of light, it's faster. We're not waiting for, millions of light years to go by in order for these things. It's an entanglement which is fascinating. And this is one of the things that I think I mentioned, maybe it showed up in this part of the interview, but it's like God allows us to see inside of his workshop. It's like, dad letting you into the garage where he keeps all of his tools and the welder and all the different things. And we're getting to see, like, okay, not just intelligent design, like, when, like Darwin, when he was coming up with his theories, some possible conclusions on the things that he was seeing, which is, very interesting. But at the same time, he even said, if there's something inside of these, because they didn't have powerful microscopes or anything,
Right.
They could see that there was something that looked like cells, like when you hold a leaf up to the light, like when you get really small, you can see cells. But he thought that some kind of, jello or something in there. It was written about in a book called Darwin's Black Box, like early 90s. But even he said, if there's something inside there, it might disprove, all the things I'm saying about, how things came about. And like we were talking about earlier, you can have stuff, 50 years later, still in a textbook that people are learning, medical science, evolutionary science, things like that they found are not capable of answering the questions and even incorrect, but they're still in there, still being taught. So, Romans, Paul says, having seen the things that have been made, man is without excuse. And he goes on and talks about how people will worship the creation rather than the creator. And I think that's what we see a lot of times when it comes to, what we call science, as if it's separate from faith. It's not. And, this conversation was two people that are very comfortable talking about the amazing things that we're seeing. I would not stop any scientific exploration. I'm fascinated with ancient cultures and monolithic structures and all of different science stuff. But anyway, but I did want to try to recap some of the conversation that you're going to miss because of technology failure, science. So yeah, we kind of got into more of what Tim is passionate about, and that is discipleship and evangelism and missions. And that was such a cool conversation. And like you said, hopefully we can have him back on so we can let him in his own words, talk about these things. But some of the things that we did talk about, besides our testimony and what God has been doing in our lives and the people around us, there's a really cool Bible study called 3/3, and you can look that up, just 3/3 Bible study. And it is a fantastic way to study the Bible with other people, and it makes an accountability for actually taking action on what you're studying and going out and and engaging people on what you're learning and learning to share that, which is awesome. And then some of the disciple stuff that he's part of a mission group, and he, like I said, he's an elder here, and some of the training tools that he has are just fantastic. And it's a handout. And if people are interested in it, then it's in a PDF form, and we can
Provide a link or something.
a link if somebody wants to, look into that. But there's a fantastic training program where you learn to develop your testimony, and it helps you kind of go through and boil things down to where you can communicate your testimony. Be ready in and out of season. As I think Paul told Timothy, be ready in and out of season to share the hope that you have in Christ, and to be able to learn to do that. Because that's one of the things
The hope that you have.
Yeah.
In Christ, like that it's your story is a personal story. And, as an author, the importance of your story cannot be stressed enough. It's not just what God is doing in the world, it's what God's doing in you. The impact that you have for other people with your testimony, that's you sharing what God is doing and has done in your life. That's a powerful thing. We share stories all the time as humans. We're wired to share stories. So when we share a story, if Rob's telling me about something that he's read, or someone else in my life group is sharing with me a prayer that was answered and something that God's doing in their life, that's them sharing their story, and it strengthens my faith and it builds the faith of those that hear. those sorts of testimonies. So your testimony is your story, and it's so important. And so I love hearing that, that anything that equips saints to be able to share their story,
Yes.
that this hope that God has given us, that this faith that he's building out in our lives, it's not just for us. It's for the people that we share our stories with. And I love that. I love hearing that. And so, yeah, if that's, if these are things that you're interested in, we'll try to provide links where we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a different thing than like talking around something or talking about a thing. Like, if you're telling somebody, I heard that there's a really good restaurant across town. Somebody I talked to said they have good food. It's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to take action on that.
Yeah.
But if you are saying, oh, I ate here and their food was better than any place I've ever ate,
Right.
and it's amazing, then that's your testimony is your story, and it is what God has been doing. And that's what we're told to be ready to share with people in and out of season. Whether you're
In fact, I brought you a taco right here. Even better.
Yes. And the other thing that they do in that same training is teach you how to engage with people, breaking the ice, starting a conversation, naturally leading the conversation towards what it is that you're wanting to talk about, and asking permission and questions in that in order to get there. And then asking permission, can I share? Was it okay with you if I share? So it's such a great, training. It's such a great way to engage with people. And that's one of the things that I struggle with terribly is, the idea of knowing, what to say to a person if I have a limited amount of time. It's like, there's so much I could say. And, I've never really tried to nail down my testimony or how to communicate that. Starting a conversation with people, to me, is so difficult. Like, I can talk to a fence post, but directing that conversation over to something that I'm passionate about, that matters, because I'm always thinking, like I said, I'm always thinking, what's this person hearing as I'm saying these things? And it's like, we live in a culture that's inundated religiously. So we have these boxes where we like to put stuff, and I do it too.
Yeah.
I'll meet somebody and instantly start decoding that person. And, okay, 30 seconds into a conversation, I know exactly who I'm talking to.
And we live in a culture where everything's an elevator pitch. You need to be able to say what you're trying to say in a short burst and hook them with that burst in order to keep their attention for anything else that you want to be able to share. I run into that when I'm doing book-related stuff. What do you write? Well, that's a conversation that could take all day.
Yeah.
I need to be able to encapsulate what I write in a sentence or two to hopefully keep them at my table and draw them in and have a conversation with them.
Yes.
But it's an interesting skill set, and it's one that you have to learn. Most people are not wired for that. Like, some people are, just like some people are wired for every crazy thing. Some people have that gifting. That's great. If that's you, more power to you. But most of us don't. Most of us need to know, how do I step into that kind of a situation and share my story? How do I break the ice, like you said? How do I get it? Knock jokes, not great. I gotta tell you, not good. But most people are not wired for that, and so to have something that trains you how to go mentally through these steps of, sharing your story with somebody and what God's doing in your life. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
And, to make that assumption, because this is an interesting, I don't know, I guess this would be like, some kind of social science thing, but to make the assumption as we're meeting somebody and talking to them, I mean, our assumptions usually end up being pretty correct. Like, if you meet somebody that looks a certain way, talks a certain way, you can start guessing what kind of music they probably listen to. And, I bet you drive a VW van with a peace sticker on the back. You start,
Right.
In a culture, you start to learn about sort of categories that we generally fit into. So, we can be pretty correct in our assumptions, and that's good and bad. It, keeps us from getting in a stranger's van because he has candy, because we've learned, that's not a great thing. But at the same time, it can also keep us from connecting to people in a deeper way, because we all have, I don't know what, masks. We all have sort of a social costume that we wear that allows us to function with other human beings. Like, the things that we say, like I'll say, "Hey Jeff, how you doing?" The correct answer is great. How are you? Um, if everybody aired everything that was going on in their lives when they were asked, "How are things going?" Well, terrible. I've just been feeling horrible. And what, nobody's really expecting that. You're expecting, you're passing somebody by the water cooler. "Hey, how's it going, Bob?"
My
Let
favorite,
me tell you.
yeah, my favorite answer to that, by the way, and it's somebody here at church that says it, but on Saturday nights I'll be sitting there and yeah, picking up bits of conversation all around me, and usually I'm talking to the folks that sit near me and whatever. But I've heard one person numerous times, somebody will say to them, "Hey, how are you doing?" And he'll say, better than I have any reason to be, or better than I deserve." And I'm like, that's a good answer. I mean, like, because it's not saying, "Oh, I'm great," but it's like, God's still at work. I'm doing better than I have any, than I deserve, and whatever. But I think you're right that and we talked about this a little bit last night in group, that we sometimes wear a pretty face, a pretty mask, because we feel like we can't share our heart. We feel like we can't be vulnerable. We feel like we can't, that people won't understand. And I will say that part of the reason for that is that we as believers are sometimes really good about judging other people for things that we let ourselves slide on.
Yeah.
We have a real tendency to judge other people by a different measure than we judge ourselves.
Yeah.
And that leads to people not wanting to be vulnerable. Like, if they, if they only knew this thing that I'm struggling with, if they only knew this thing, they would reject me. They wouldn't welcome me into their group. They wouldn't want to sit next to me on Sunday. They wouldn't, invite my kids to their birthday party. They wouldn't, whatever.
Right.
And it's like, but there needs to be freedom within the body of Christ to not be okay. We're all here because we're not okay.
Right.
We're all here because we're in need of a savior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's normal and natural to function in a society where we're used to acknowledging people without connecting with people. And that's why you can have a situation like we do have in our country, where so many people are lonely. They're living amongst other people, but they're desperately lonely. They're not connecting with people. And sometimes they don't have the ability to connect with other people because of, like what you were just saying, is that they feel like something's wrong with them. They're broke. Other people have it all together. And, therefore I'm not going to stand in front of everybody and drop my pants and let people see what a mess I am.
Well, it's also why we turn to the wrong things, right? It's why we turn to identity politics, so that, like, I don't have a connection to people. So my connection is then through this one identifier that we've decided on makes us a community, or we're disconnected. So pornography becomes the way that I feel less alone, or, this bit of minutia that, this fad or this thing that I fall into that becomes my identity, right? I'm a Swiftie. I'm a this thing. I'm a that thing. And we try to find identities and things that will not sustain us ever, that are,
Yeah. Some of that stuff, you just have to shake it off.
correct. Who knew that Rob knew a Taylor Swift reference? That's awesome. Always surprising me, Rob. But we do look for, and so if we cannot feel safe and able to be vulnerable in our faith community, in our church, and yes, we there are different levels of that, right? Trust is not just given. It has to be earned. It has to be, so there are things that I would certainly share to you. Yeah, there are certainly things that I wouldn't, that I would share with you that I wouldn't necessarily share with just random people that sit around me on Sunday or Saturday or whatever. And there are things that I would certainly share with my wife that I wouldn't share with you, as much as I love you, Rob. So just to put you in your place, calm down. So, that's understandable, but we have to be able to share the things that we struggle with to
I
get.
think as Christians, one of the best freedoms, let's say, that we have in Christ, and one of the best skills that we could develop because of that freedom in Christ, is allowing other people to be seen, to connect with them, and not ask or demand of them that they think a certain way or agree with you or anything else, but just to be there and to let that person be seen and to be comfortable with me, and to allow myself to be able to express to you that, that I do not have it all together.
Yeah.
I am a mess, and the person that holds me together is Christ himself in this relationship. And then to demonstrate that love, to demonstrate that stability that we find in Christ to that person, is probably the biggest thing that's going to draw somebody to him. If they see something in us, if they see that somehow we're standing in the same eye of the storm that they're standing in, but we're not being moved like them or like other people that they know. We're not freaking out. We're not angry. We're not hating. We're not, we have peace. We have love. I have joy. And it's not, I'm not pointing to my church and saying, hey, we've got really good music and, a great band and whatever, and happy talky time. No, that's an expression of what we're getting from Christ. And we want to get together here at the building. It's not that we got, sucked into some kind of cultish thing where we feel better about everything falling apart around us. That's not what.
Oh, have you not been invited to the cult yet? I'm sorry. I didn't know you were on the outside. I would have extended an invitation.
Well, thank you. I'm always the last to get the invite. Yeah, no, it was a really good conversation. And it's so interesting to me that, as a Christian, you can grow so much in a particular direction or area or areas, but you can still be really bad at being able to communicate your testimony with people, which is what I am. Like, sorry, I keep hitting that mic. The idea of the elevator pitch. If I have a limited time, I'm at an airport or whatever with somebody, and I have 5 minutes with this person, it's like, I have no idea what to say to this person, because as soon as I say something about Jesus, they're going to be like, if one of those.
Yeah.
Because I am. When somebody, even when somebody starts talking about something and, that I don't like, or that bores me, or, that puts a person in a weird category or something like that, it's like I have that same reaction, which is it's interesting. It's a very human thing.
Yeah.
And, to be able to communicate that in this culture, I think it is a learned thing. We want to be authentic. We want to be natural so that we're not fake. And I don't want to fake anybody out or trick somebody into, listening to me talk about Jesus. I want to share something that's real, but it's like a learned thing. It's being able to go through and boil things down to, what does somebody need to hear? What can I share with somebody from my own life that might not be really comfortable for me to share, but it's real and it's true.
And I think that's where being genuine matters a lot. Because I'll own that I'm uncomfortable if I'm in a situation where there are a lot of people around and somebody just starts talking about Jesus loudly in a way that I'm like, I'm not sure how the people around me are going to take this right now. Whereas my approach would be to get to know people and to talk to them and let them into my life and share my story with them as I find an opportunity to do so. That sometimes I feel uncomfortable with that. And it's like, I shouldn't. There's nothing wrong with talking about your faith. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I'm also very well aware of, for some people, that's an automatic, the door just closed because the word Jesus was said out loud in a coffee shop or whatever. Yeah. And so I'm attuned to that. And I'm like, this is not the way I would approach this. And then because it's not my approach, I suddenly get uncomfortable. But there's some people that are wired that way. And there's some people that God has put it on their heart to just feel that sense of urgency and that sense of freedom to speak up wherever they are. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's not how I'm wired.
Right.
And so I have to get over my own sort of biases and my own sort of understanding of it's okay for me to be who God's called me to be. That doesn't mean Steve over there that's preaching Jesus on the street corner has to do it the way I do it.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Totally unique.
And
Yeah.
I think sometimes we err either on the side of, well, I don't want to be that guy,
Yeah.
right? But you're still called to share the gospel. You're still called to be salt and light in the world that you live in. That means talking sometimes. That means sharing the gospel. And so finding a way to share your story. This is what God's done in my life. This is what he saved me from. This is who he shows himself to be to me over and over and over again. This is how gracious he was to me at my worst. This is how patient he was with me when I was struggling with this thing. This is how loving he was to me when I was in open rebellion. This is how, that we have those stories to share and they matter. And so whether you're in that moment and the Holy Spirit prompts you, like, now's the time to say something, or you're just living your life and loving people and finding these open doorways or these open windows to share the gospel and to share your story and to, in the simple ways, the complex ways. Not everybody's called to a pulpit. Not everybody's called to a street corner. Not everybody's called to, but you're a missionary where you are right now.
Yeah.
You're called where you are.
And like, so for me, this is I could do this literally every day, all day. And I know there's probably not a lot of people that relate to this, and I find it funny, but you could put me in front of a microphone addressing the whole entire earth, like everybody is watching, and I'm perfectly comfortable in that kind of an environment. Like, as long as I know what I'm going to say, you know what I'm saying? I mean, not necessarily a written down speech, but as long as I know the talking points, I would be perfectly happy in front of the largest audience ever assembled. But where I get less comfortable is in a smaller group of, 3 or 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
Then I start getting uncomfortable. And especially when I'm with like one person that I don't really know. I mean, we've met.
And just to take some tension off, you understand that we're not recording any of this right now, right? I'm watching a YouTube video on this side of my phone. You're just talking to the back.
I wonder why is it cat videos? Because I love those. I wonder why you're laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a learned thing. It's something that, it's very interesting to me to learn how to, connect with people and not feel like I have to drop the name Jesus a certain amount of times or whatever. And just to be there and connect with that person and let them be seen. And then to be able to ask that permission. Would you mind if I shared something with you that is I'm passionate about, and to just drop that at their permission.
Yeah.
It's like such a great model. It's like, yeah, I could do that. I can't be a street preacher.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
And I think that we tend to get that twisted. We tend to look at other people and go, I could never do that. I could never be that guy. But you're not called to be that guy.
Right.
If you look at the Old Testament, you look at the prophets in the Old Testament, some of those prophets had the ear of the king. Some of those prophets were on the run for their lives because no one wanted to hear what God had to say to them. Not everybody's story is the same. Some pastors will faithfully preach to a congregation of 25 or 30 people, and that'll be their life as a minister. Some will preach in front of thousands at large events and have people quoting them and have videos go viral and whatever. Okay, but you don't have to be that. Right? Both those pastors are hopefully doing the work that God's called them to and serving faithfully where they're called. But that doesn't mean that the guy who's preaching to 30 people needs to look at the guy that's preaching to 5,000 and go, man, what am I doing wrong? Why am I stuck in this thing? No, listen, my circle is pretty small these days. I don't have a day job. I'm a writer. I stay at home. I work. I interact with my kids. I interact with my wife. I interact with my church group. But my circle is pretty small compared to what it was in my 20s when I worked a full-time job. And in the travel industry, new people everywhere. It's a very different situation. But the point is that where you are now, that's where you're called. That's the mission field that you're called to. If you're a student in a public school, you're called to that mission field. If you are working in a day job where you're, maybe there's only 5 other employees in the place, that's still your mission field, right? And it doesn't mean that you got to go out there and be like the street preacher and come in with, 15 times of mentioning Jesus per minute so that you can, no, that's not what it has to be. You have a story. You have this love that God's put in your heart for him and for other people, and you can spill that out onto them in the ways that God allows you to do that. And you can learn, like Rob's saying, you can learn how to open up those conversations and how to share them where it's more comfortable for you and your way of sharing your story, but you're still called to share it. And so in ways,
you're wired a certain way.
yeah, and
You're unique.
in ways big and small, your presence in their lives can impact them in those moments where you do get to talk about Jesus, and in the moments where you're just praying for them and they don't even know it. God uses all of that. He's always at work in that. So yeah, I think it's great. We'll try to find the link for that and put the link in the show notes so that if you want to look at that PDF or whatever that Rob was talking about, we can have that for you. And we'll try to put some information about the ministries that Tim works with as well, so that if you want to check those out, you can find that as well. Did you have anything else before we break to final thoughts?
I mean, I could go on for days.
You'd get hungry eventually, I think.
Who was that senator that filibustered for the longest time on history? Yeah, I would need a bathroom break, but I'm sure I could do that. I'm sure we can do that.
Jimmy Stewart did a pretty long one, I think, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Mr. Smith, yeah, that was such a good one.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll be right back, and Rob will give you his final thoughts. And now for this episode's final thought with my good friend and co-host, Rob Sharp.
So that was a great conversation with Mr. Tim Ferree. I really appreciated him spending that time having that conversation. And again, that was only the first part of our conversation. Unfortunately, with the technical issues, we lost probably 2/3 of the conversation. But we got some good stuff in there. And so I guess, we've kind of commented on some of the other things that we talked about. Me and Jeff kind of went through some of those things. But just, I guess, to comment on the parts that we did get, and what's really, fascinating to me and interesting is that the more the sciences uncover in physics and archaeology and, linguistics, everything, the more it points towards the Bible being reliable and true, and Jesus being this very real figure with a ton of evidence that points to him doing the things that he said he did, and all the people that attested to his death, burial, and resurrection, including, secular sources, people who were not Christian, they were not Jewish, they were Roman historians, and Jewish historians that had nothing to do with Jesus commented on him and what the disciples said and did afterward. And there's just so much that points to God and his truth. So I just wanted to run through, if you enjoy YouTube videos and kind of digging into this stuff, there's some very good sources out there where you can hear a Christian perspective on, why we believe what we believe and what different findings show. And it's not a vacuum. These Christian apologists will also have debates with non-Christian people who disagree. And what I like about that is you're never going to have enough evidence to prove something beyond a shadow of a doubt. It doesn't, regardless of what your views are, there's never going to be an airtight
case as far as evidence because people believe what they believe. Our justice system in this country is set up the same way. That's why you have a jury of more than one person, because people will disagree and they'll hash through things. And even at the end of, court cases where all the evidence in the world has, pointing in a particular direction, you're still going to have skeptical people that just, they don't buy it because of this or that. So we have this phrase in our legal system called a reasonable doubt. So what I appreciate about Christians who are scientists and whatever discipline they're in, that's one of the things I appreciate about them being apologists for the Christian faith is at least they are presenting a reasonable doubt. So you might go to high school or college and hear things presented in a particular way as if there's only one way to see things, as if every brilliant scientist or author out there is a non-believer, an atheist or agnostic or whatever, and that's just absolutely not the case. So I just wanted to run through some good channels, and this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch, but these are some different people that I like to listen to or see who they've been debating or what they've been saying. So Ruslan KD, that's an interesting one. He covers a whole bunch of stuff from what's going on in media, what's going on in Hollywood, to science, to Catholic, Protestant debates, Orthodox, whatever. I mean, he covers a whole range of stuff. Very interesting, very informative. Stephen C. Meyer, a lot of people have seen him on Piers Morgan, Joe Rogan, that kind of thing. He's a scientist, well versed in microbiology, and he brings an outstanding case for intelligent design and fine tuning of things that are just impossible to get, order from chaos, life from death, everything from nothing, that sort of thing. He just kind of shows it scientifically. James Tour is another one, microbiologist, fantastic. Frank Turek, who is a Christian apologist and I assume writer and teacher, but he's not afraid to approach questions that people have. Is God good? And well, what about this? And if God's supposed to be a good God, then how can he say this or do that or whatever? And it's like Frank Turek does not back away from tough questions, and it's he's a good one to watch. Inspiring Philosophy is another channel. Jordan Peterson, obviously most people have heard of him. He's very informative in a lot of ways. Cliff Connectley, he likes to go to college universities and let people ask questions, speak their mind, disagree, whatever. He's fun to watch. Reasons to Believe, Hugh Ross. He is a Canadian astrophysicist who was an atheist and who has his own journey that he likes to talk about, and he's a brilliant guy. Even Andrew Wilson, who shows up and he's kind of a sassy Christian sort of guy, but it's sometimes refreshing to have somebody come from a different angle and lay things out in a particular way, even if it's not lacks a little bit of I don't know, tact in some cases, maybe. But anyway, so I just wanted to run through some of those. If you're hearing all of one side, if you're getting your information just from non-Christian sources and it feels like the whole world is atheist or agnostic, secular, that all the smart people reject faith in God, then I would just say these are some interesting sites, things you can look up. It's great to go after information and data and do your comparisons and, see what does seem reasonable. That's all fantastic. Um, but it's a better conclusion when that conclusion is a personal experience. Like, it's going to be hard to become, top of the field of microbiologist and astrophysicist and all the things, archaeologist, that you would need to be a linguist to be able to really see what these ancient languages are saying and all that sort of thing. It would take many lifetimes to become, top of your field, to be able to, look into all these things for yourself and try to come to some conclusion. So there's a bit of trust and faith. That's why we have debates, to let people bring ideas against each other and source their information and their conclusions and whatever. But it's always best when your conclusions come from something personal and real in your life. And ultimately, I think that's where, Jeff and I are going to end up in this encouragement. These are great sites. These are, brilliant people, top of their field, etc. But if you really want to be convinced in your own mind of what is true and what is real, your best conclusion is going to happen because you've had a personal experience. And that is what Jesus is offering. That is what God is calling us to, is to have a personal relationship with him. And by personal relationship with him, I don't mean going to a church and having somebody, pat you on the head and say, I confirm thee, thou hast had a personal experience. I'm talking about something that you relate to, where you have met God and you have put your faith in him and you have seen him act and you have heard his voice and you have seen him be faithful in your life and in the people around you. And that's what, as a body of believers, that's what our fellowship is there for. We're there encouraging each other, and we're talking to each other about, what God is doing in our lives and in the people's lives around us, and we're praying for each other. So, yes, there is false Christianity, and yes, there are Christians in the church who don't know the Bible. They don't know what they believe. They're warming themselves by other people's fire, and, they're enjoying community and music, and it's country club, and it's, whatever else you want to call it. And it's shallow, and it's not real. And we hope that in those people's lives, it becomes real. I've heard from several well-known pastors that they've known pastors that have gotten saved in the pulpit. They've been leading the church and they have become saved themselves in the pulpit. They had a head knowledge. They had an understanding of the faith. They had, emotions and things that were drawing them to that. But then they had an experience where they met the one true living God, his son Jesus, and it changed them. And they went from knowing about to knowing personally. Because we don't ever want to hear the phrase from God that, depart from me, I never knew you. So it's about him knowing us, and we can't know him until we are known by him and allow him to prepare us to know him, which is what he does in our lives. Because we don't get to God through our intellect or our effort. God is knowable. He loves you. He loves the worst of us. He knows our struggles. He knows our humanity. And he wants to draw you to himself and have a relationship with you. And that is the most incredible thing. And so I would just encourage anybody watching this that's wrestling with these things to pray, talk to him, look up some of these sites. If you've got doubts about things that just don't make sense, and I mean, look up some Christians who are talking about these things that can at least create a reasonable doubt for you as to why we believe these things. It's not a blind faith. It's not a leap into darkness and nothingness. We have proof. Our faith is based on something, and when you enter into that relationship, then that faith just grows. And now it's based on something, and whom you have believed, not just what you have believed. And that makes all the difference in the world. And then you can understand why Christians in the early church, Christians in China now, and in other places on the globe where Christianity your faith is illegal and can get you thrown in prison, killed, lose your family, lose your business, lose everything else. Why would these people do this? What are they gaining? Well, they're gaining a relationship with the one that created them and who's calling them to be with him eternally. And when you experience that and you know that personally, then it changes everything. Ask him to reveal himself. And it might not be the way that you want, the way that you expect. We'd love to, see God drop down through the ceiling and say, ta-da, here I am. But that's not how God works. He's not a circus sideshow, and he is a way that he has called us to himself, which is through faith, which is through dying to ourselves and serving others. So if you are willing to pursue him in the way that he has called you to pursue him, you will absolutely find him. So I just want to encourage you with that and say until next time.